I think I need to turn that thing around. They don't teach you these things in preaching school. Wow, that's weird. Y'all doing well tonight? Think it'll rain? Mightn't it? I seen on Facebook, you probably seen it too, this one fella said, man, I wish it rained. It hadn't rained in 15 or 20 minutes. and it's just raining all the time. Good to see you. Crowd's a little slimmer, but boy, it's a lot better looking than it was last night. Bree Nanner, how are you? I always called her Bree Nanner when she was a little bitty girl. I guess now she's grown up, I have to stop that. Boy, we've been on a journey this week in Vacation Bible School. Don't you love Vacation Bible School, especially with the children and watching them and listening to them? And I'd not heard this song that the young boys sang tonight. Have you ever heard that one, Paul? Well, I hadn't. I guess I'm just old and forget those things, but I thought that was a pretty good one. God has a plan. That's the theme for us this week. Sunday night, God has a plan. The birth and exile has a plan when we're helpless. You know, I don't know if you have yet. Sometimes people find themselves helpless. Often somebody will say something and they'll express that, well, you know, I just felt helpless. I've not been there yet. I hope I don't get there. We've had some things happen, of course, in life, but I've never felt that. But God has a plan when we get that way. The children of Israel, man, they were growing. Everything was going, but they were in slavery and they were helpless, and God had a plan. Last night, Tim talked about the burning bush. God has a plan when we doubt. As a Christian, have you ever doubted? I think probably we have. What have we done? Have we ever doubted God? Maybe we have. Maybe we haven't. But boy, sometimes things happen. But I do like my topic tonight. God has a plan when we're stubborn. Are you a stubborn person? Do you know people that's stubborn? Sometimes it's enjoyable to watch someone being stubborn against somebody and you know, just can't get them to move, can't get them to do anything, and sometimes it's even humorous. What do you associate with stubbornness? Question to each or anyone. What do you associate with stubbornness? Yeah, a mule. There you go. There you go. Yeah, boy, that's it. Yeah. Headstrong has a bunch of synonyms. Adamant, determined, dogged, headstrong, ornery. That fits pretty good. Ornery, thinking about someone stubborn. Talking about a mule. Philip Mountain Signs, Brandon's name escapes me right now. He had a horse, and it's a beautiful horse, and but he turned stubborn on him one day. He could not make that horse move. He had him and bridled up, and he pulled and tucked, and he told this story. He said, now sometimes you have to be kind of rough with a horse, so if you're a horse lover, don't take this too serious. He said, I whipped that horse till I couldn't whip him no longer, and he wouldn't move. And Robert Huffaker, if you know Robert Huffaker walked out there, grabbed the halter, and just walked off with him. This guy said, I was so mad that horse just becomes stubborn. What else might you associate with stubbornness? What's your thought? I want to read you a translation. I looked and looked for a translation. You know, It says, well, let me get over to Exodus chapter 14 and read it in this translation. It uses the word that most of the translations use, Exodus chapter 14 and verse 4. I'll harden Pharaoh's heart so that he'll pursue them. A translation is just called God's translation, God's Word translation. I'm not familiar with it, but it says this: I'll make Pharaoh so stubborn that he'll pursue them. That fits pretty well. I really like, I'm kind of intrigued, but I like how the easy-to-read version says, it says, I will make Pharaoh brave, and he'll chase you. Now, I kept thinking, well, what does that mean to be stubborn, to be brave? But sometimes we're just too brave, and we're not going to listen. We're not scared of anything. We're not going to listen to anything. You know, isn't it amazing that some people are not afraid of God? Some people just literally are not afraid of God. They're so brave that they're not afraid of God at all. One writer said about these passages, God's purpose in this is the hardening of Pharaoh's heart served a divine purpose, and that's so true. It allowed God to perform miraculous signs and wonders in Egypt, ultimately leading to the Israelites' liberation and demonstrating God's sovereignty over all creation. Now let me ask you a question. You may know the answer, you may not. Is the 10 plagues referenced in the New Testament? I don't think so. And that kind of surprised me. The 10 plagues are not referenced in the New Testament at all. All the things we see in the New Testament about the Old Testament, things that happened, I don't think. I looked, I've searched, I even Googled it. Google's the best concordance I think there is. But we don't find anything that I can find in the New Testament about the 10 plagues. And it was so important. I want to start with two passages in the New Testament that I pretty much always use when talking about the Old Testament. Of course, it's Romans chapter 15 and verse 4. For whatever was written in the past was written for our instruction, so that we may have hope through endurance and through the encouragement from the Scriptures. In the Old Testament, things that were written then, in the olden time, the ancient time, they were written that we might have hope. What does the story of the 10 plagues, what is it, I say story, what does the happening of the 10 plagues, how does that give us hope? That when we become stubborn and just sit down on God, God's going to make a plan to move us. You know, God will move us when we don't want to move. What maybe Bible, Old Testament, back in Genesis story, how God scattered people. They wouldn't want to do what God said do. They was wanting to build something themselves, and they was wanting to build it all the way up to heaven, maybe be with God or share the power of God. I don't know why they wanted to build this tower, but what was it called? Tower of Babel or Babel, however you want to pronounce it. And what did God do? Well, these people become stubborn. Hey, we're going to do this. He scattered them. Here's a New Testament example. I think that works real well here. The church was in Jerusalem, and the church was growing rapidly in Jerusalem, doing great things. Some say that maybe there maybe as many as 20,000 Christians when the doors was open to the church, when the church was established, and they were just all there in Jerusalem. And what was the commission? Go into all the world, make disciples of all the nations. But they were just staying right there. Possibly, I think, probably, that's just I think, that in Acts chapter 8, when God scattered the Christians through persecution, I really think that was a God thing, kind of like in the Tower of Babel. Got to get them out. You see, in Acts chapter 1, I believe it's verse 8, somewhere around there, it tells us that, the gospel is going to go to Judea, Jerusalem, and to Samaria, and to the rest of the world, but they wasn't going anywhere. Boy, God can still move like that today. So we're looking at the 10 plagues, and we're looking at the stubbornness of this man called Pharaoh. When the time came, God raised up Moses to deliver his people. Why were they in Egypt to begin with? And maybe how long had they been there? Why were they in Egypt? Remember, there was a great famine. Joseph was a great man in Egypt. He brought his family, I believe it was around 70 people, and he gave them the land of Goshen, and they lived there, and boy, they began to multiply. Now, one of the things I hope we see and understand in this is that the Egyptians were very religious people. Is there a time in the Old Testament when the Bible tells us about a group of people, they was very religious? King James uses the word superstitious, but the word was religious. In Acts chapter 17, Paul goes to Athens, and he goes and he sees all these signs and all these things to all these gods, and Paul says, I see you're very religious people. Well, the religion in Egypt, just let me read what one man wrote. Far beneath and above everything in Egypt was religion. We find it there in every stand and form. We see its influence in literature and government and art and everything except morality. And it's not only varied, it's tropically abundant. Only in Rome and India shall we find so plentiful a belief in everything. And then he writes this: we cannot understand the Egyptian or man until we study his gods. You'll know a man when you study his religion. I heard just this afternoon on one of the national news is talking about the head man in Iran. And here's what this guy said. He said, they're religious fanatics. And you can't trust them about anything, talking about having a nuclear bomb. Said you can't trust them in anything because they're religious fanatics. Everything they do is based upon religion. Now, it's using religion there in a bad way. Religion is good if it's God's religion. Religion in itself might not always be good. We see that in our world. But he says, they're religious fanatics. And so we see that there come a time, as Tim talked last night, the burning bush and Moses to go and approach Pharaoh, and he gave the excuses, and finally he said, Aaron will talk for you, and you'll be a god. And I wanted to ask Tim about that. I can't go to the passage right now; it's just not stuck in my head. But when he tells that Aaron will be with him, he says, "You'll be a god to Aaron." And you'll speak through Aaron. Well, God's working this thing out that the Israelites are helpless. Maybe they're in doubt, but they're stubborn. And God's going to open some doors. So when the time came, God raised up Moses to deliver his people. Chapter 3, verse 9 and 10. Exodus chapter 3, 9 and 10. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 19 and 20, Pharaoh would resist God, providing an opportunity for his people to display his might. God's going to show you, I want to show you how strong I am. In Exodus chapter 3, and looking at verse 19 and 20, it says this, Exodus chapter 3. However, I know that the king of Egypt will not allow you to go, even under force from a strong hand. But when I stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with my miracles that I will perform in it, after that he'll let you go. But verse 21 says, and I will give these people such favor with the Egyptians that when you go, you'll not go empty-handed. Each woman will ask her neighbor and any woman staying in her house for silver and gold, jewelry, clothing, and you'll put them on your sons and daughters so that you'll plunder the Egyptians. Well, if you go to Exodus chapter 12 in verse 20 and 22, it says the Egyptians are going to be kind to the Israelites. And then verses 35 and 36 of Exodus chapter 12, the Egyptians at the end were kind. Just what God said was going to happen, happened. That they become kind to them. Why were they not kind to them before? What was happening? Well, why was Egypt, why were the Egyptians afraid of the Israelites? They were threatening them in a way. I don't think physically they're threatening them, but how was they threatening the Egyptians? Man, they was multiplying. They was growing. They couldn't stop their growth. And they're saying, hey, they may overtake us. They're our slaves, but they may overtake us. And God said, boy, there's going to come a time where they're going to be kind to you, and they're going to enrich you. They're going to give you all their jewelry, all their clothes, all their things. And then as the Israelites are leaving Egypt, that's exactly what happens. This tells me something. God keeps His word. He keeps His word. He'll keep His word to us as well. That whatever He says, that's going to happen. The plagues became a judgment against all the gods of Egypt. I read this, and I've read this several times. I heard Matt say this in a lesson. It's been a good while back. Egypt worshipped over 80 gods. That's a lot of gods. Now, Israel, and we're not to the point yet to where Israel is told you'll have no other gods before you. They knew that, and they were not to have other gods before them. When we get up to the 10 Commandments, they're going to be told you shall have no other gods before you. During the book of Genesis and the travels of all those, and especially from Abraham on, did Israel ever worship other gods? Well, sure they did. What was Solomon's big problem? You'll say, well, his big problem was women. Well, yes and no. It wasn't so much women in general, but him allowing these women to bring in their idols and bring in their gods. And you know, the wisest, the richest, maybe the smartest man that ever lived was duped by the idols. I have known of one case in particular, but known of other cases, hearing about, to where our servicemen marrying ladies in other lands, and I'm not saying that's wrong, not against that at all, but often in their wedding ceremonies they would do idolatrous things. I know of one that was married in Thailand, and she was Buddhist, and she insisted that he would go through a Buddhist wedding, and it was a lot of idolatry involved in this. Are things any different today? Well, they're really not. Not anything's different today. But why do we have this tremendous story way back over in the Old Testament? I think 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 3 helps us to know why. His divine power has given us everything required for life and godliness through the knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and His own goodness or His own virtue. We have everything we need. I want to use this phrase. We have everything we need not to mess up. But still sometimes we mess up. But we've been given this in the Old Testament. My aunt, my mother's sister, when I become a Christian, she took me out and bought me my first Bible. I was 21, almost 22 maybe, and she bought me my first Bible. Never had a Bible before except one the Gideons gave me when I was in the 5th grade, and it didn't last very long, I think a night or two maybe. But she bought me this Bible, and here's what she told me. And of great Christian woman, not being critical of her, but it's sometimes how some people feel, or maybe sometimes how people don't have the knowledge they should. She said, now, Sonny, read the Old Testament. Don't worry so much. I know she said, Sonny, read the New Testament. I'm sorry. Said, don't worry so much about the Old Testament. Wow. I become an avid reader of the New. I would read a book a day, and I read through the New Testament every month for a pretty long time. Just reading, grabbing a hold. And then when I went to IBC, I only had one Old Testament class. It was Old Testament survey. You know how far we got? Did you ever take Old Testament survey? How far did you get? Do you remember? We didn't even get to the Psalms. We didn't even get, you can't do a survey in one semester of the Old Testament. And it was a great class, and it helped me. It really was. But at the same time, I've never really had no Old Testament study. Did y'all have a good study at Memphis in the Old Testament? I think everything was a good study at Memphis. Boy, they had a strong program. But I never had any. And so what amazes me when I hear somebody like Matt or a lot of other people that's gone to Mars Hill and Freed Hardeman and their entire life, their whole life, they've just been in the Bible in all their life, and how much they know. When I was at Petersville, the first time when I was assistant preacher, there's a lady named Dinah Thigpen, and she was so smart in the Old Testament. And I asked Dinah, I said, how do you, she knew all the kings, she knew all the judges, and she knew all these things just right off the top of her head. And I said, how did you get this? And this is a plug for Mars Hill if you want to use it there. She said, you know, in elementary school in the Mars Hill, we drilled every single day. And she said, it's never left me. I've got it right up here. And I see so many people that have it there. Brenda talking to Wayne one time, I was talking to Wayne about, you know, how do you get it? I said, Wayne, I can't get this. And he said something that's really impacted me. He said, you know, Sonny, he said, my entire life, I can remember my mama holding me as a little baby and reading the Bible to me. Well, see, I didn't start till I was 21, almost 22. And these stories are fresh to me. Last Wednesday night, when Matt was over in Exodus, and he was writing about Moses' son, and he had not been circumcised, and what was it what was Moses' wife's name? Jochebed was his mother. Come on now, you're going to have to help me. Anyway, boy, she you know, she said, what was the phrase Matt used? Something about blood. You know, you're not doing it right. Moses, you didn't do it right. I'd never heard that. And I went back, and I should remember it now, but I went back last week and read that several times, and I thought, wow. You see, when Romans 15, verse 4 tells us about all these things was written to give us hope. So when I see this happening, I keep using the word story. When I was at Mount Zion, there was a lady who didn't like me to say story. She said, stories are made up. It's happenings. And so I try to say happenings, but story works best for me. I understand what I'm saying. But like this fella said, we cannot understand the Egyptian or man until we study his gods. And I didn't know this for a long, long time, but every plague that happened, it was against, of course, the Egyptians, but what was it really against? Well, it was against their gods. Moses, or God, through Moses and through these plagues, defeated every god that they worshipped. I don't know how much time we got since we started late, but I won't keep us too long. But just the water to blood, how they revered the Nile River, and that it was the very lifeline of Egypt and the center of the many religious teachings and the religious associations they had with their God. The God of Khoum. I was telling Paul, I went through every one of these, got on Google and got Google to pronounce it, and now I can't pronounce them. But anyway, this God of the Nile River and how they revered and reverenced this God. Moses, through that first plague, just killed that God. The river died, turned it to blood. The fish died. They didn't have no water to drink. Sure, it was against the Egyptians, but it was defeating the God that they worshiped. The second one was the frogs. And I thought this was interesting. The frog was associated with the goddess Hecate, the wife of the creator of the world, the goddess of birth. And man, he brought frogs everywhere to where they hated their God. They hated the God they served. One writer said, by the way, even the involuntary slaughter of a frog was punished by death. You was not to kill a frog. You know what they had to end up doing? Kill the frogs. Everything that they thought about this God, the frog, the wife of the creator of the world, the goddess of birth, they had to destroy it. The lice, number 3. It's the god of Gelb, some say Gelp. It's the god of the earth. It come from the earth. And I thought this was interesting. This lice, it means something that bores under the skin. We know what chiggers and stuff like this are today and what lice is today. But I thought this was interesting. It says it was especially dreadful to the priest of Egypt. Listen to this. For they were required to shave all their body hair off every day, including eyebrows and eyelashes. They would wear a single tunic and bathe twice a day so no lice would come upon their bodies. And all of a sudden, they're filled with lice. Nothing you can do about it. He destroyed their God, that God. Not going to go through all of them, but something that I did think was very interesting also when we get down to the death of the livestock. And as I read that, I noticed that this death only came to the livestock of the Egyptians and not the Israelites. And so I looked this up. It said the first 3 plagues, the blood, the frogs, and the lice, are generally understood to have affected both the Israelites and the Egyptians. It wasn't just the Israelites, the Egyptians that was been bombarded by the death of the Nile River and the frogs and the lice, but also Egypt was too. But here's what I read. The following plagues, the flies, death of the livestock, the boils, the hail, the locusts, the darkness, primarily impacted the Egyptians, with some text suggesting that the Israelites were spared from these. Don't you know that made the Egyptians hate the Israelites so much more? Their cattle's dying and all these things are invading them, but just right over here where they're at, there's nothing happening. You know, sometimes this old river that runs between Lauderdale and Colbert County, and storms sometimes are affected on one side or the other, and the others not. And we think, well, why aren't they getting what we're getting? Aren't we glad that our weather has not been so terrible right here in our area, especially over Muscle Shoals where we live? It just seems like to bypass us sometimes. Well, there were some things that bypassed the Israelites, but sometimes they got it, but the Egyptians were bombarded with plagues. It says here, the god Apis represented a bull, and all of these animals of these gods, their God died. Their God's dead. Can't help them at all. The bulls. I thought this interesting. This was probably a skin anthrax abscesses, black abscesses that developed into things that was horrible. They're particularly painful, generally affected knees, legs, and soles of the feet. Might think some of what happened to Job. And then on, going through all the plagues, and then going to the 9th plague of darkness. Here's what one writer said about this plague. Here was an insult to Egypt's entire religion and culture. Here was an insult to Egypt's entire religion and culture. The sun god, Amun-Ra, was considered to be the greatest blessing in all the land. This god was supposed to be Pharaoh's father. Father of lights. We know about a father of lights. He's called our God, Jehovah God. But God destroyed that father. And then we come to the last one, the death of the firstborn. Boy, wasn't that something. Many cultures, the firstborn, they were special. But God used this one to finally open the eyes and open the heart of Pharaoh. Notice how long it took. But yet God said himself, he even told Moses, he's not going to listen to you. He's not going to listen to me. But I'm going to make him listen. Brethren, let's not force God to make us to listen. Let's be good servants and let's listen. Pharaoh was a god himself. It was a title that was supreme ruler of ancient Egypt. And God defeated him in every way one could be defeated. Now, just a little bit talking about stubbornness and how awful it was that they were so stubborn toward God. Let me ask you, is there a time where stubbornness was good? Can you think of a happening in the Bible where stubbornness was a good thing? Can you think of 3 young boys that were stubborn? The king told them, hey, when you hear all the music, when you hear all the music and everybody falls to their feet when they hear falls to their knees when they hear this music, and they'll worship this, I think it was like this statue of 90 feet. It was strange. I think it was only 9 feet wide and 90 feet tall. I believe that's pretty close to right. I think that's the way it was. And here's what it says in Daniel chapter 3. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue. Yep, and here it is, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. He set it upon the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar sent out a word to the assembly, to all the leading people, the rulers, satraps, and all these people, and that when you hear the music, you fall down and you worship the gold statue. Verse 6 says, but whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. And then listen to verse 7, Daniel 3 and verse 7. Therefore, when all the people, I think Till made a reference last night to the word all. What does the word all mean, generally speaking? All. Everybody, everything. Therefore, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, the flute, this thing, it starts with a Z, I don't know what it is, the lyre, the harp, every kind of music, people of every nation and language fell down and worshiped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Everybody did. Verse 12. All right, come to the king. There are some Jews you've appointed to manage the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men have ignored you, the king. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you've set up. You know what these 3 boys were? They're stubborn. They were very stubborn. You go down to verse 18. Let's I'll go back to 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to give you an answer to this question. If the God we serve exists, then He can rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire and rescue us from the power of you, the king. But even if He does not rescue us, we want you to know as king, to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you set up. That's stubborn. These guys were stubborn in a good way. How stubborn are you? How stubborn am I? When it comes to what we're going to worship, what we're going to serve, what we're going to do, we better be stubborn for God. These three boys, young men, might have been 17 years old or so when they were captured. Not sure how old they are right here, but they were stubborn. But going back to the title of the lesson, God has a plan even when we're stubborn. If we're disobedient, God has a plan that He'll get our attention. But if we're stubborn in that good way, God has a plan for us too. He'll open to us the gates of heaven. Any thoughts or questions? If I can't answer it, maybe somebody can. But in the happening of the 10 plagues, just amazing. It's amazing to me. It's not referenced in the New Testament, or I couldn't find it referenced in the New Testament nowhere. But boy, it serves such a purpose, because that is what set the Israelites free. And they started on their journey from Kadesh Barnea to the land of Canaan. It took them a while to get there. Do you know how long a walk it was if they started right here to get to right here, Kadesh Barnea to the land of Canaan? Do you know how long a walk that really was? 11 days. You know how long it took them? For over 40 or around 40 years. You know why? They were stubborn. They complained and griped and fussed the whole way. Church, we can learn so much about this happening in the book of Exodus and the plagues, and so much we can learn from the happening in Daniel of when to be stubborn and when not to be stubborn. If God says move, move. If God says do, do. If God says don't, don't. And we need to be stubborn about that. If the world says move, if the world says don't move, then we better be stubborn to the world. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for letting me be with you. Tomorrow night will be the last night for the adult class. Jackie and I will be in Athens tomorrow night with the congregation. But I like the title, God Has a Plan When It Seems Impossible. That's a good title. I know Ben Kackelman waxed eloquently on that topic. Thank you so much. We're dismissed. Well, let's have a quick prayer. I didn't even begin with a prayer. Let's have a quick prayer. Thank you so much, Father, for your wonderful blessings upon us. Help us, Father, to be stubborn in that good way, to not move with the world, but to move with and for you. Please forgive us. Be with our children as they learn these lessons, these stories, these happenings, that they too will be stubborn in that good way. In Jesus' name, and amen. Thank you.